Confidence in supply opposition parties others coordinates. 48 degrees 51 minutes 43 seconds north 2 degrees 19:07 A, 48.862036 degrees north 2.318593 degrees east, 48.862036. 2.318593 The National Assembly. There are 577 deputies, each elected by a single-member constituency through a two-round voting system. Thus, 289 seats are required for a majority. The assembly is presided over by a president, normally from the largest party represented, assisted by vice presidents from across the represented political spectrum. The term of the National Assembly is 5 years. However, the President of the Republic may dissolve the assembly unless it has been dissolved in the preceding 12 months. This measure has become rarer since the 2000 referendum reduced the presidential term from 7 to 5 years. A president usually has a majority elected in the assembly 2 months after the presidential election, and it would be of little benefit to dissolve it for those reasons. Following a tradition started by the First National Assembly during the French Revolution, the left-wing parties sit to the left as seen from the president's seat, and the right-wing parties sit to the right, and the seating arrangement thus directly indicates the political spectrum as represented in the assembly. The official seat of the National Assembly is the Palais Bourbon on the banks of the River Seine. The assembly also uses other neighboring buildings, including the Immeuble Chaban Delmas on the Rue de l'Université. It is guarded by Republican guards. The Constitution of the French Fifth Republic greatly increased the power of the executive at the expense of Parliament. Compared to previous constitutions, the President of the Republic can decide to dissolve the National Assembly and call for new legislative elections. This is meant as a way to resolve stalemates where the Assembly cannot decide on a clear political direction. This possibility is seldom exercised. The last dissolution was by Jacques Chirac in 1997. Following from the lack of popularity of Prime Minister Alain Juppé. However, the plan backfired, and the newly elected majority was opposed to Chirac. The National Assembly can overthrow the executive government. Is likely to be rarer now that presidential and assembly terms are the same length. While motions de censure are periodically proposed by the opposition following government actions that it deems highly inappropriate, they are purely rhetorical. Party discipline ensures that, throughout a parliamentary term, the government is never overthrown by the assembly. Since the beginning of the Fifth Republic, there has only been one single successful motion de censure. In 1962 in hostility to the referendum on the method of election of the president. And President Charles de Gaulle dissolved the assembly within a few days. The government or opposition group legislators of the assembly can ask written or oral questions to ministers. The Wednesday afternoon 3 p.m. session of Questions to the Government is broadcast live on television. Like Prime Minister's Questions in Britain, it is largely a show for the viewer, with members of the majority asking flattering questions, while the opposition tries to embarrass the government. Since 1988, the 577 deputies are elected by direct universal suffrage with a two-round system by constituency. For a 5-year mandate, subject to dissolution, the constituencies each have about 100,000 inhabitants. The electoral law of 1986 specifies their variance of population within a département should not exceed 20% when conducting any redistribution. However, none were redrawn between 1982 and 2009. As a result of population movements, births and deaths inequalities between the less populous rural districts and the urban districts arose. For example, the deputy for the most populous represented 188,000 voters, while that for the other extreme represented 34,000. That for Saint-Pierre and Miquelon serves fewer than 6,000. Most were redrawn in 2009. But this redistribution was controversial, such as the creation of 11 constituencies for French residents overseas without increasing the number of seats. To be elected in the first round of voting, a candidate must obtain at least 50% of the votes cast, with a turnout of at least 25% of the registered voters on the electoral rolls. If no candidate is elected in the first round, those who account for in excess of 12.5% of the registered voters are entered in the second round. of voting. If no 3 or more meet such conditions, the 2 highest placing candidates automatically advance to the second round of voting, at which the candidate who receives the most votes is elected. Each candidate is enrolled along with a substitute, who takes the candidate's place if during tenure incapacitated or barred, if the deputy becomes minister. For example, the Organic Law of 10 July 1985 established a system of party list proportional representation within the framework of the Département. It